Hey there guys, TPC Guy here with the news in tech and gaming for the week, and the highlight of the week definitely goes for the 3950X launch from AMD. It has just came out last week, a couple of days ago. It was supposed to be coming out last month already, in September actually, not last month, 2 months ago then, but it was delayed for, well, mostly unknown reasons, although it is speculated that it is related with how much they could actually get made before the launch to have some stock, or with thermal issues that potentially arise in trying to reach the advertised frequencies. In any case, well, I could not obviously test it myself, but I have read around some reviews. I have some numbers that I will be putting from Gamers Nexus. All credit to them for actually doing the testing. But it is a case of a very good CPU for a very good price for what it is. Although a bit weirdly marketed, it is being marketed as a gaming CPU when it actually does not really fit into that type of usage. It has 16 cores and 32 threads, and yes, it does beat the 3900X, however it still falls short of the 9900K or KS, considering the clock speeds aren't really that huge, at least not compared to the Intel counterparts. This does present it more as a workload CPU for productivity work, be it video rendering and other kind of things, and the numbers kind of do back it up. It's a bit strange that they chose to market it as a gaming CPU, where does not really shine, at least not in comparison to the Intel alternatives. However, if you do compare it to other workstation CPUs from Intel, then the value does really pop out. Comparing it, for example, side by side with the 9980XE, which is the closest thing that Intel has right now that is on the same sort of range, it does beat it by a large margin in most works, even in gaming. As you can see, this is a GTA 5 again from Gamers Nexus. Credit to Steve and his team for actually producing the numbers. It does beat it in terms of gaming. It does lose to the Intel i9 and i7 counterparts from latest generation. However, like I said, gaming is not where you should be focusing at for these CPUs. If you look, for example, at their Adobe Premiere Pro at 4K benchmark, it is beating pretty much everything. It is not really beating the 9980XE by a margin of 1 point something seconds. However, it is completely stomping anything that Intel has to offer on its mainstream platform. And this is an important point because the 3950X is a mainstream CPU that fits on the AM4 socket, so you don't need that expensive of a motherboard to make use of it, as with Intel, with the 9980XE, you will need a different motherboard. You'll need an HEDT motherboard for it, which will also be more expensive, and the CPUs themselves are more expensive. Even if the 9880XE does beat AMD's part for a small margin, you have to keep in mind that the XE is a $2,000 part, while the 3950X is retailing at $750. So that's less than half, noticeably less than half, I might add. It remains to be seen how it will be with Intel's next generation parts for the HDD lineup, which also will be having a price reduction. However, by that time, the Threadrippers will also be out, and well, then that's a whole different story because this is technically a mainstream CPU, and the Threadrippers are what you will have to compare Intel's HDD parts with. As such, I would not recommend the CPU to anyone for gaming. There are much better alternatives, both in terms of price and in terms of performance. However, if you also use your computer for actual work, like video editing, if you do a lot of that sort of work, then this will cut down your render times in quite a while, a long time, and it will obviously save you time that you can actually put into producing more content or whatever you do with your parts to actually recoup your costs on getting such a CPU, and the costs of actually having a system like this are much lower than Intel's counterparts at this point. So that's my recommendation right now in terms of this part. Just ignore it for gaming. If you are going for something else, then it is indeed worth it. At the other end of the scale, the Ryzen 9 3900 has also been reviewed, this time by Tom's Hardware. The thing with the 3900 non-X is that it does not seem to be a CPU that you can actually buy loose. It is exclusive to OEMs and pre-built, so you will definitely have to have a whole system and not just buy the CPU to use. And it seems to be pretty consistent with what would be expected. It's Ryzen 3900 that is pushed down the TDP from the usual 105 to 65 watts. This means obviously lesser performance, lower clock speeds, and it is quite consistent with what you get, for example, when you enable the eco mode on your 3900X. Enabling the eco mode on 3900X brings the TDP down and gives you the same sort of performance as you see on this, which, I mean, it does make sense because it's consuming the same type of energy, even if the capabilities of the hardware are greater and it could be pushed further. What are the advantages of getting the 3900 then? Well, it is a pre-built, like I said, so you do not have much of a choice in terms of what you put in there. If you get a PC that comes from an OEM like that, you do get, for example, things like PCIe 4 interface and that sort of stuff that you can use if you need fast storage speed, and you don't necessarily want to pay for the 3900X because you don't need to use its full capabilities. It is obviously a cheaper CPU and it is more of a budget choice, let's call it. On the blue team, however, there is less reason to celebrate. There has been a new variant of Zombieload discovered that also affects their CPUs from 2013 up to Cascade Lake generation. Zombieload, along other types of exploits that have been discovered, attack CPUs that use speculative execution to try to predict what kind of data your applications will need to have it ready beforehand. However, this makes them vulnerable to certain exploits that let people have access to sensitive data that they shouldn't be able to see. I have lost count right now of how many different types of exploits have been found on the Intel processors like this. Truth be told, there have been rogue reports of attacks actually being done using these vulnerabilities. It also helps that for a lot of these vulnerabilities you do need to have local access to actually take advantage of them, so you're not necessarily in risk if your computer is not accessed by people that are not trusted, let's say. But the fact that they even exist leads to other problems, like there could be other exploits in the future that take advantage of these ones to actually, for example, remotely be able to affect your CPU or get sensitive data from your system. Now, this is not really much of a worry for most of us home users. However, for data centers and companies, that sort of thing, then it becomes a lot of it becomes a very different story. And that, coupled with the fact that AMD has been having quite a big success in the data center business with their EPYC Rome processors, then that does spell bad news for Intel. And even if this on itself is not a huge issue, compounded with all the other issues that Intel has been having, other exploits, AMD actually being competitive both in price and performance now, then that does not really spell great news for Intel in the data center business either. The CryEngine team has just released the Noir benchmark for public use. Anyone can go on their website, download it and use it. And it is basically a ray tracing benchmark that does not necessarily rely on NVIDIA's RT cores on their RTX cards to do ray tracing, so it does not necessarily need hardware support as much as long as it supports it software-wise. The benchmark itself does give us some interesting insight on how different cards perform with ray tracing that is hardware agnostic, that does not rely on a brand or another to achieve its purpose, and it does give us very interesting results. As expected, cards like the 2080 Ti are at the top of the list, or the Titan RTX for that matter. However, it is interesting to see that on the mid-range, cards like the 5700 and 5700 XT from AMD are actually beating RTX specific cards like the RTX 2060 with its hardware-based RT cores to help with ray tracing. They are actually being beaten by their AMD counterparts without actual ray tracing cores that are present on the cards themselves. This does kind of throw a wrench on NVIDIA's argument that you really do need an RTX card if you want to run games with ray tracing in the future. It does kind of make you think that if AMD's cards actually get to a point where they compete, just normal rasterization speaking, if they can compete with the 2080 Ti in the future, for example, or I just mean at that level, be it with the 3080 or 4080, whatever it is, at that point in time, if they can compete at the highest level in the GPU market, they don't necessarily need things like RT cores or hardware-based solutions to actually do ray tracing as long as it is well optimized. So it does kind of make you wonder if the premium that people are paying for NVIDIA's RTX cards having those RT cores, if it's actually worth it, or if it's just a way of milking people out of, well, basically price gouging for a technology that is not strictly necessary, and it is also not really fully well developed right now. This hopefully will change with the rumors we've heard from next generation that the cards will be cheaper, be better at ray tracing, while also being better at rasterization. So hopefully it will all be a little bit better optimized on NVIDIA's side. And again, and I've said it multiple times, hopefully AMD will get to the point where it can compete at a high level, and that will, like we saw with the whole Intel versus AMD things, hopefully drive the prices down a little bit, which benefits all of us really. Now, these have been the highlights in the tech world for the week. There have been other little tidbits of information that I did not feel like worth it giving it their own, let's say, segment in this video. There are talks about the PS5, for example, having a cartridge system for SSDs to provide with expansion that would allow people to actually just to allow Sony to just ship you with a very basic SSD in terms of actually capacity, and you would be able to get a cartridge and expand that way. So they would have a cheaper base price for their console, and you would have the ability to increase the storage if you were to choose to for an extra price. Also, some analysts has came out and they said that they expect the 3080 Ti series, or well, the 30,000 series from NVIDIA's RTX lineup to come out next year around the end of the year, or at least, you know, third, fourth quarter of the year. Remains to be seen if that will happen or not, and that they expect it to be announced around the middle of the year or so. Again, all speculation. I did not feel like that it was worth it. Actually, giving it a very long time of talking in this video. So it's all rumors, it's all talk. It's nothing official right now. Now, this has been Ethic PC Guy. I hope you guys have enjoyed the little summary of the news of the week. If you did, leave a like and a comment. It really helps the video reach more people. That type of engagement. So really do leave a like and a comment if you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to help the channel grow in the future, consider subscribing and checking out our other content, and well, doing the same. And I hope I'll see you guys next week for the next round of tech news. Have fun.